Sorry, I was dealing with a Debian thing, and now we're recording. Oops.
Nope, that's okay. Hello, everybody. This is the Kubernetes, which one is this? Production Readiness Subproject meeting for February 10th, 2021. Let's get started. Be nice to each other. So feature freeze was yesterday, and we had a lot of reviews. It looks like we divided almost exactly equally between the three of us, basically 22 each, because that's pretty good. Some of mine, I have to admit, were like non-issues because they were like tooling caps or something, but hey, I had some hard ones too. And so I figured the only thing I had on the agenda today was like a retrospective, how to go for folks, what can we do better, and maybe there hasn't been enough time to think about it yet. But you know, here we are. One thought I had was that I put it on the agenda, so I keep too many tabs open and lose things. I'm sure it applies to all of us. It is. Okay, so yeah, the tooling missing caps, that's a good one. Okay, let's just take them in order. Oh, I should just display this. Now I lost my Zoom window. So still copy here. Jesus. Teach my language. All right. Share. All right, there we go. So this issue's been out there for a while, and I just thought the folks here should look at it. We've known that there would be keps that are different, sort of a different category. And so I'm suggesting process, feature, and tooling types for keps. Production readiness reviews would apply to features, maybe to tooling, but I think just to features.
That came up at the leads meeting yesterday. I think Stephen had talked a little bit about, like, on the enhancement side, trying to categorize things differently, and also potentially for the process ones, not apply the enhancement freeze deadline to them. So yeah. I don't know if that's a bigger enhancements conversation.
It definitely is. I just thought the folks on this call should know about it. And so I'm putting it out there. That's all. I agree. Yeah, process ones, probably the freeze doesn't apply to. And also sometimes the tooling ones, the freeze doesn't really apply to. I mean, if it's not production code, like, it's not as critical that it follow the schedule the same way, but you also don't want to disrupt the schedule, disrupt the tooling.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a big CI change, for example, that should probably be synced with a release schedule. So I guess right. It's hard to say. It's like maybe that one's maybe a maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I will say I only had one where this was questionable. There was one that came in where it was, hey, we want to add a verify test. And it referenced like they wanted to use something that was a real code change. And that one went through a separate cap. But the split made it real easy to approve. Do we have enough of them to make it an issue, though? That'd be like 5% for me. All the others were definitely worth looking at.
I think there were 3 or 4 on my list, some of which didn't go through yet, but there were 3 or 4 that, there were 2 that were just purely tooling changes. There's one that's about the KEP process itself. There's not a ton of them, agreed, there's not a ton of them, but you know, there's just some percentage. I don't know. It's a bigger question, but we can, talk about it with the enhancements sub-team.
Okay.
So team expansion. So Alana is here because she wants to join our little crew, and she's very welcome.
Thank you. It's been strongly suggested to me by a number of people that, not just on this call, that I might be a good fit for the team. And so I asked Day Job, I'm already doing a lot of KEP review, but like this is a lot of extra work. Do you want me to do this? And they said, sure. So
Okay.
if y'all will accept me, I would be happy to step up. I mean, one of my concerns when we rolled this out for this release was the team is too small. It's going to block things. It's going to be miserable for that team. And at least like, I guess having me join hopefully addresses some of that. Like, I don't want to, point out problems and not be willing to help fix them. I will say, I think it would be great if we could expand the team even more, but I'm not sure what that would look like.
Yeah, we have one person from VMware who is interested, but I haven't seen him around lately, so I'm not sure what's happening. But yes, we definitely want to expand the team. And your feedback was super helpful, actually, Ellen, because we went and better documented it, and we still got that's something on the retrospective that's not I didn't put down. I should is communication. Like there were a number of people who had no idea about this, and so we clearly did not advertise it long enough, hard enough, widely enough. That's if we're going to introduce additional changes in the process, we need to do a better job advertising it. But your feedback there did get us to document it better, provide example PRs. I think it made people's lives a lot easier. It made our lives a lot easier.
That's great.
And the process a lot smoother. So I appreciate that.
So I think that regarding documentation, I think there are still people who didn't know that like the KEP template change and so on. I think there will always be people that don't really follow what is happening. So the question is rather how many such people there were, or not if they were, right?
So I will say one thing I took as good news. I have not gotten a flood of, you didn't get to my PR in time, and now I need you to help me file an exception. I have gotten actually 0 of those. I don't know.
I have gotten 0 of those too.
Me too. Yeah.
There are a couple that didn't go through, but like.
Oh yeah, there were some that didn't make it, but it was usually because there were issues on their caps.
There are issues where they just didn't, they stopped responding. Ever.
So success.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good thing. We were not the bottleneck that Alana worried about, but it was a lot of.
I mean, it looked painful. I was very appreciative that you were not a bottleneck, and I know we were like looking at turnaround times and whatnot. And Derek was saying for SIG Node, so PRR has like a 5-day turnaround right now, so you've got to request it early. I think there's also tooling improvements that could be made there as well. I had talked to Steven about how there was nothing really validating the stage and latest milestone on current PRs. Yes. And that was a problem because without that, it wasn't actually flagging the PRR review. So people wouldn't even know about it until last minute. And so that wasn't a great experience. Like it should be a little bit more self-evident. But I think that there are changes coming that will hopefully help with that.
Yeah, we also had an issue where we required valid YAML, which seems very reasonable. Like, surely you can describe this YAML correctly. But John found like 5 PRs that he was going through. It was like, hey, David, this one doesn't have anything, and I'm kind of busy. What are you doing?
Yeah, so exactly. So the tooling and didn't fail CI for invalid YAML, and on top of that, April query relies on I can't type relies on, that's not correct, is it? No. On valid relies. Thank you. I'm just like my head. Okay. Lies. Valid. Yeah. Okay. So David's taking over. I'm doing so badly. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's just a wider enhancements issue. Like that should not fall on this team to have to worry about that. If there's a requirement for that to be valid, that just needs to be validated.
Yeah, it needs much better validation, but and I mean the kept control query thing is pretty hacky. Like it was written to go through the files, and then I just was like, but I want PRs, so I just stuffed PRs in there, and it's like the flow is really bad. It kind of needs a rework. Yeah. With that, I don't even have to type.
I think the whole receipts process will help a lot, because we will have like a much stronger validation what is going into a particular release. You don't have to like cross-check with like some spreadsheets and so on and so on. So I think that will hopefully change a lot here.
Yeah. What I ended up doing is running the tool and having it spit it out. Well, you saw it. I think Wojtek, you saw it. I guess both of you did, David, too. Spitting it out and putting it in a spreadsheet, and then iterating over that spreadsheet, because the tool takes kind of a long time to run, and I can't put notes in the tool. So when I run the tool, so that worked better for me. But if there was a way to integrate it with PR dashboard or something, and like, as I go through it, I like to put a little note on, like, when's the last time I looked at this? Because the GitHub notifications aren't useful, so I use polling instead on the ones that I'm working on. I did cache the PRs, David.
Man, I mean, yeah, really? Because at least the level that I had, it still went out every time.
It goes out. It still goes out every time, because I cached yes, you're right. I only cached the list of polls, but then I think it still needs to call out to get the files for each poll, and of course it needs to do a git. It needs to pull it into git too.
Yeah, super painful.
So I haven't been using the CapCuddle tool at all. Is it possible, like, could we improve the bot to, like, when it sees a given PR, like automatically assign based on the cap YAML, the like reviewers, the approver, the PRR approver?
Maybe, but like, I don't know. I guess it depends on how many you have. But like, I'm on the assign list for 5 to 10% of every issue in all of Cube, and even a higher percentage in OpenShift. So my GitHub notification page is just like,
yeah, mine's a mess too, but it's certainly not that bad. That's how I tend to filter these things, at least. Like, I'll look at all of the open PRs with the label for like this SIG, that SIG, and what's assigned to me versus what's not. Because a lot of the ones, like, I will remove myself as an assignee if it's not relevant.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just as just doing a query on kind cap assigned to me, or maybe we can add a label for PRR review or something that gets flagged.
I mostly just use the GitHub UI, so like if I'm just looking in the GitHub UI for the one repo, it's relatively manageable.
Well, yeah, the enhancement repo isn't that big, so in this particular case, it's not too bad.
Yeah, I think that once we have, or we already have like a validation if the PRR file, the prod readiness YAML is created. So if we would be assigning PRs based on that, I think that would be helpful. Like the page with PRs assigned to me is definitely assigned, like manageable for me, as opposed to like GitHub notifications. Yeah.
Right.
No objection. Certainly willing to give it a try.
Okay, so that's something we could look into then. Let's go. Who's going to look into that? Chirp. Atlanta, you're new to the team. You want to pitch in?
I can try.
Awesome. See that? What's your?
E Hashman. You have an extra N. Yeah, that one.
What's that? See?
It's not super urgent to like. I don't expect much load over the next like 3 months.
Exactly. This is for the next release cycle.
Maybe by that point, I'll actually know how to write Go.
Okay. Possible separate questions. So did we want to put anything else there?
So that was my biggest thing from looking through and trying to figure out, what do people most have trouble with? There were occasional contributors who didn't really think about watching how new APIs they were introducing may fail. So there's some friction with no, really, we need a metric for this.
Yes,
there was a bit of friction with no, really, you need a feature gate, right? Even though you have a flag, no one knows that flag is alpha. If you just put the flag there, they have no way of knowing.
Right.
And putting the flag there or having the feature gate there helps people know that. But the last one was I would get answers back about how like a cluster admin can make sure a feature was installed. But if you look at something like, say, a Windows container, Windows privileged container, the person who actually creates that pod needs to know whether it worked or not too. And there were a couple of enhancements that had difficulties around was a user's intent fulfilled, right? There were a couple with storage that came back and had difficulty, and the Windows container. So I think I saw it on at least maybe 3 or 4. There's about 25%, I guess 20% of the ones that were reviewed.
I also definitely saw a lot of, but it's a command line flag. We don't need a feature flag because, you'll know if you specify the flag. And a thing that I ran into a little bit of difficulty with when I saw that sort of thing is I didn't have documentation to point to saying this is how you generally need to life cycle like adding features, and like it has to have a feature flag, and then this happens when it goes to beta, and this happens when it goes to graduated. Like I know that there's sort of the unwritten word of how that works, but I could not point people at a doc.
I think a doc, if we wrote it, would end up having to be nuanced. I can be convinced that, say, a new flag in kube control, does it have an alpha feature gate on a flag to kube control that controls a query that they send out, right? Think about how we did dry run in the past. Dry run came in, did it need to have a feature gate in kube control? So there needs to be a line drawn. I have been drawing it around basically client-facing components and cluster admin-facing components.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We even have it in the common issues already. There's maybe some clarity needed. This is not the feature flag thing. Sorry, maybe I'm digressing, but clarity needed around like metrics are generally for the operators, events are generally for the users, and logs really aren't for anybody. I mean, logs are last resort, I guess, for operators. Like, you shouldn't be emitting events for things users don't care about. Well, maybe you want to, but you shouldn't be doing metrics for user error, in my opinion. Right?
I agree. I mean, the examples that I had were ones where there was no event, or you didn't get a proper 422, or like your pod would just start and maybe wouldn't work sometimes. It got scheduled to the wrong template.
Yeah, that's another thing that we really don't have a lot of document. I mean, there exists a SIG instrumentation guide for this, but it's not really like being constantly maintained. There's certainly no one enforcing it. If that's going to start happening through like PRR review, I have been trying to find more people to work on this sort of thing, but I don't think there's anybody evangelizing best practices for like, what do you do with metrics? What do you do with events? What do you do with logging? That kind of thing.
Is there something, I haven't looked, I mean, is there some documentation about cardinality and about, like, it seems like there are definitely metric best practices that we could summarize and point people.
I mean, there's a thing in the Kubernetes community repo. The problem is that it's not necessarily 100% up to date.
Sure.
And it doesn't like tell you, you know, like, how do you know that your metric is useful or something like that, which is a big issue that I've seen with a lot of like the metrics incoming. They're like kind of useless. So it's like, well, great, you ticked the box that you have an SLI, but it doesn't tell me anything. Like, I'm never going to use that as a cluster operator. And now we're saying they have to add metrics, but like, if nobody's going to look at it and it's another metric, it's just, you know, yet another time series, adding load on your Prometheus for questionable benefit. I am looking up to see if I can pull up the link for instrumentation stuff.
Yeah, from mine PRRs, I think the metrics is the biggest thing. Like, I think the metrics part was problematic in like half of the PRRs or something that I was doing. The second thing was basically about like, how can the rollout fail, which like most of people, probably even more than a half, were initially saying it can't fail.
Yeah.
Which is and most of, like, for example, I didn't have even a single phase in a single case where there wasn't a feature gate, for example. Like, in all 22 PRs that I did, there was like feature gate from the very beginning. So I don't know if I was lucky here or
most of them had it, but I had one or two that didn't.
I had 2 or 3 that didn't have it.
The metrics thing and the thinking through rolling out, disabling and then re-enabling in a large cluster that's full of active workloads, I think was a struggle for a lot of folks.
That's where a lot of my, like, is the intent working or not came from, where it would be a case of like, well, it was on, and then you start turning it off, or like it's half on because we're rolling out and the nodes are on. And sometimes when you get scheduled, it works, and sometimes when you get scheduled, it doesn't. Was a challenge. I do grant some slack for that because it doesn't happen very often, right? Like, you're not going to be in that state usually, hope, very long, as long as you can recognize it with an event or like your actual create failing. It's okay. You know, Alana or Elena, I feel bad. I interviewed you twice.
Alana. Very hard for Americans. Only Celeste can pronounce my name correctly, apparently.
You work with SIG Node, right? One of the things that that came up a few times was there's no like capability checking for like, does this node support the feature that's trying to be used? So I'm not sure like how a scheduler can make a proper decision. And it came up.
I have no idea if that's, I mean, I guess that would be a SIG Node thing.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything like that in the cards. Node has many problems, of which I guess that could also be one of them.
Okay. Just a thought for the future as I was looking through a lot of these. Many of them were vulnerable to that.
On the metrics issues thing, I think I raised this on an unrelated PR as sort of a drive-by comment because it came up in a number of the PRR reviews. A lot of the times I would see people like coming up with metrics that were really easy to measure and then sort of trying to pigeonhole them into SLOs after. I would like to see for like maybe question updates, putting the SLO stuff first, forcing them to think about how do they actually want their feature to be used, and then try to figure out like what metrics we would use to like determine that it was actually working correctly or that it was healthy. Because I was definitely like, because I was seeing a lot of, well, I added this metric because it was really easy to measure, but it's not necessarily a useful metric. I think that like maybe if we switch the order, it might help like prime people's thinking to reduce that a little bit.
I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
Yeah, I can attempt the template rewrite for that one if we want to assign people things.
Yeah, I like to put people's names on things because then they usually happen. If you don't, they just don't happen. Thank you.
Somebody's got to do the other two separate question things. I'm not volunteering for this.
I'll have a stab at that since it was one that I observed.
Okay. I like the intent was fulfilled phrasing better because it's more flexible. It gives a clear picture. Do we need, and maybe some of these documents exist, but I wonder if it would be useful for people to have either links out to or some reference where we can describe, like, when we talk about enablement, disablement, upgrade, what does the upgrade process look like in a typical large cluster? Like, I'm sure we've got that documented somewhere, but I don't want people to read 3 pages. I want them to read 1 paragraph, and like maybe we can summarize some of that so that it's like it's the mindset. Like, it's like, imagine that it's Friday and you've got the pager and you want to go home. Are you going to go and enable this feature? Like, what are you gonna look at to make sure that you can leave, kind of thing? Like, it's just, I just think people aren't used to thinking that way, and a little blurb writing it up might help them think through. Okay, we're gonna upgrade the masters, and then we're gonna, I should say, the control plane nodes, and then we're gonna, how do we know we're ready to upgrade the nodes? Something like that. Any thoughts there? Do you think that would be useful to people? Would that have been useful for people who have looked at before they answered your questions on your caps?
I'm trying to decide whether I think it's opinionated or not.
There's definitely different ways to do the upgrades and everything, but like,
I guess I'd put it in the potentially useful if we could have some not super opinionated way to do it. I know that a lot of people who do deployments like to have ±1, right, ability, and be able to do that in a structured way. But it's not, I don't know if everybody does. Maybe like minimum bar would be, think about how this works in an HA environment where half your Kube API servers are updated and half aren't.
Yeah, and certainly as you roll out sweep across your nodes, how does that work?
I think it's worth trying to write up, and we can see whether we agree. I don't even know if we do it the same way you do it, John.
Probably not. But some of it was even like, so for the dual stack one, like, I was like, even if you've got, it's an operational issue, even regardless, if you've got a single stack service and it's got 10,000 clients hammering it constantly, right? And it's got 5,000 endpoints, and you switch it to dual stack, the DNS begins returning the secondary address family immediately, but you don't have endpoints and you don't have IP tables wired up on that address, on that IP family. So all of a sudden you've got 10,000 clients, and potentially half of them, just because of the way DNS works and how frequently they look it up, might start going to the new family and absolutely crush the one little endpoint out there that's actually been wired up, right? So it's a transition period, it's a time period thing, and I sort of like was thinking through it and came up with that scenario, thinking through the enablement, but it's actually an operational issue regardless. It doesn't even matter. So, like, you know, and if you haven't upgraded your nodes yet, like I can imagine, yeah, all kinds of bad things happening, I guess. But I don't know that people are thinking about the rollout as progressive that way.
Yeah, I guess it's worth, I guess you write 5 sentences and we write 5 sentences, and we'll see if our 5-sentence upgrade story
it's close enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I think HA control plane is probably like minimum threshold.
Yeah.
That we can probably all agree on. And then basically, I guess, you know, we see like a certain number of nodes drained at a time. As each one is drained, they get upgraded, and then roll out and then continue on. There's like a sort of canary stage, and then a bulk stage, and then a cleanup.
You do a few nodes, and then you see how it goes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that as being useful.
Okay. Well, why don't I give myself an action item and not just let everybody else take them, and I can do that.
Oh, good.
All right. Any other thoughts? Any other people things want to discuss?
That's all I had. I'm glad feature freeze was cap freeze was yesterday.
Yeah. There have not been very many exception requests or anything yet, so that's good. It looks like we have a new attendee, Jyoti. Is that how I say your name? Welcome.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you. You can pronounce it's Jyoti.
So we're just wrapping up here, but you know, if you want to introduce yourself, we can introduce ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm currently working at AWS in the EKS team, and I'm just curious. I've never joined this meeting before, but I just got curious about the SIG architecture. So I'm just trying to listen. I've worked with Envoy a bit at Lyft before for the last 2-3 years, and now I'm at EKS trying to contribute to Kubernetes. So yeah, that's
great. Well,
awesome. Welcome. The official, like, I think wider SIG architecture meeting is tomorrow, and I don't know what time zone you're on, but if you are on Pacific time like me, it's at 11 tomorrow.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'll be just trying to listen.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Well, this is specifically around production readiness, which is a new process we introduced over the last couple of releases. And today, this release was the first release where we like really made people do answer these questions in their features, and then we go through and try and make sure that that they've answered them well, and make changes if they don't. So yeah, welcome tomorrow. Like Alana said, is the bigger SIG architecture community meeting, which you can find the agenda and everything on the website.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. I think I requested access to the doc. I probably didn't have that.
You need to probably join the Google group.
I see. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a SIG
then you'll just
architecture
get
Google
access.
group. You'll get access to all that stuff.
Okay.
So I had a quick question about recruiting. I don't know, I haven't been looking at basically any CAPs that were not in either Node or instrumentation. Are there other people who have been kind of doing some of the PRR review that we could reach out to ask about interest in joining the team? Because I think it would be ideal if like every SIG had somebody on the PRR team that they sort of designated as like, yes, this person is good for like network PRR review or something. Like I wouldn't be able to do PRR for a network issue very well necessarily. So
I don't like, so you have experience running clusters, even if you don't have a networking specific background. Wouldn't you want to have confidence that they managed to explain it in a way where you can understand, okay, I know what it does, I know how to measure what is working, whether it's working or not, and I know how to turn it off if it doesn't work anymore. Like that's,
yeah, I guess I would just I would potentially lack the expertise to be able to like say whether or not their explanations were actually correct and would actually work. Like it's one thing to write it down and say, oh, this will work this way, but I might not actually, like what if it doesn't work that way in practice?
But I think actually that there is a value of someone from outside the SIG doing the PR for that SIG, because if you are part of the SIG, you are taking part on all the discussions about the particular feature. You are already kind of biased towards some thinking. So having someone from completely outside actually have benefits in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
I mean, it would be nice to have, we you know, obviously having more people would be good. But again, it is a different viewpoint. We don't want the SIG viewpoint here. I mean, it's not we don't want it, but we want an additional viewpoint of like, you know, the cluster operator is not going to be an expert in networking necessarily either, but they need to know that like, hey, traffic stopped flowing, you know, everything's breaking, and oh, what metric, you know, do I look at to figure out what's going wrong, or is it your feature that broke traffic? You know, they can understand at that level.
So do we have like a pool of like OPSIR sort of people that we can draw from to try to get more people involved?
So we've tried. I think it's just some evangelism we need to do over the next. When I'm in a meeting.
Or alternatively, they're all so busy trying to fix the Kubernetes clusters that are on fire.
Yes, exactly. So I've tried to solicit people like from our GK SRE team, but like, you know, they're busy. And so I'm getting crickets.
I can try to evangelize, if you will, in both. I think like there's a Pound SRE channel in the Slack that might be a good place to advertise.
Absolutely, yeah.
Potentially
I didn't even know that.
Externally. So my other question is, as a, like, I guess an SRE or something like that, one thing that I also consider as part of production readiness is security considerations. That's currently not part of this review process. Is that something we want to think about in the future? And who would we get involved if there's anybody we'd need to poke about that sort of thing?
I guess part of this isn't so much to catch, did you go through all the steps and did you find the right guy in SIGAuth to look to make sure that your privileged field makes sense. I guess this is more, from my point of view, like a summary from the KEP author or, you know, the SIG to say like, hey, this is how we suggest you debug it. I did not see many as I was looking at that looked like they had unresolved security considerations. I don't know whether John or Roy have.
I asked some questions around that, but I didn't consider, that was just incidental as far as I was concerned. It wasn't part of the production readiness review. It was more like, you know, have you thought about this in this feature? I think.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is not right for this group, but like right now we don't really have at the enhancement level, we don't really have a, well, if you add this for alpha, is this introducing a big, ugly security hole? Because certainly there's been some discussion in SIG node meetings about, you know, the kubelet taking like user specified input of an arbitrary binary and then execing that. And like there are certainly security implications there, but you know, it wasn't like a large part of the review process. And there was a lot of, oh, but it's just alpha. Well, even if it's just alpha, if it's turned on, you can potentially use it. So
I think we generally have trusted the SIGs to engage the right people and done a pretty good job. Though the ones that I've seen that have gotten away from people have been mostly around SIG scheduling and DOSing concerns, where you can do all sorts of like weird platform denial stuff because of the way that the scheduling has affinity to nodes and less affinity to namespace sort of things. I don't know. I don't think it would be this forum to try to force people to go through a security review, and I don't know right now where I would come down on a stand for that, because of the way some of it is opinionated around, like, well, we deploy like this and we don't care, or if you deploy like that, it doesn't matter, and those considerations are real.
yeah, I just added a note saying, I think there's agreement that this is maybe not the right forum for it, but hopefully that it is valuable. I don't know if maybe that's something that like SIG security can have input on, but it's, I feel like it's a bit of a gap right now.
Yeah, we did full scalability into this process. You know, but I'm kind of right about where David is. I'm not sure. I don't think it's probably the right place, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's mostly, what do we do?
Yeah, I think
this is not the right place.
Yeah, we definitely would also need like another set of people. I don't feel like competent to review any security related stuff. So I had actually 2 cases where I directly reached to Jordan for his thoughts, and like in one case it resulted in significant changes to the cap. But yeah,
I imagine that would be sort of a probably a SIG Arch question, and I guess I'd have to prepare an opinion. I know for sure John would have to prepare an opinion, but
maybe think about it.
Yeah, you know, we have to, we're walking a line between too much and too little process, right? So we have to be careful. All right, any last items? Okay.
Do you want me to submit a PR to the owners file to add myself to the group now? Is that good?
I saw one review you did, which was good. I didn't see any others.
I have done many. But like, do you need me to go and give you the whole, like, there wasn't really a template like there is for the...
let's assume we want a resume, sort of like we do for the contributor letter. And let's see if I pull a number out of somewhere. How do you feel about like 6, John? 5?
Sure. 5 or 6, it would be great. Yeah, we can see that.
I'm sure I've done 5.
We can look them over. The one I saw was good, right? Like, so look them over, make sure they look, and yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.